Hi, it's Lindsay Carlson here. When it comes to feature film franchises, the James Bond series is one of the most iconic, memorable, and culturally impactful. For years and years, we've only had the newer Daniel Craig films in the Bond series on 4K, but at long last, Warner Brothers, who apparently is now releasing all of the old MGM titles onto 4K, put out their first collection of older James Bond films. This is the Sean Connery 6-film collection of James Bond movies. I'm going to unbox this release and share my opinions. Gotta say, I'm honestly not a huge fan of this artwork. I mean, you got his face in the bottom corner. You got a bunch of Japanese writing for no apparent reason, which honestly I think is kind of confusing to the consumer. And up there you got some text and other little elements. Yeah, there's also a steelbook set that was released around this same time, but even it didn't use original movie poster art, so I'm not too crazy about the look of that one either. But pick your poison, I guess. There's our spine text. Back cover's got the iconic shot of Sean Connery with his gun, and then you got some smaller pics there of Connery from the various films. Under the slipcover, you pretty much get the same art. We do get a digital code for the 6 films that are included in this set. And I do have to get one unfortunate piece of news out of the way right away, and that is that Warner Brothers actually did lie in the initial press release for this set. The initial press release showed prototype art that specifically said this set would include Blu-ray copies of the films. The final release does not include them, so that prototype art they showed was very misleading. Sadly, this seems to be a recent trend of Warner Brothers. They basically refuse to include Blu-ray copies with any of their 4K releases now. They're the one mainstream studio that seems to do this, and that's very disappointing. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on with the unboxing. First of all, we have Dr. No from 1962, From Russia with Love from 1963, Goldfinger from 1964, Thunderball from 1965, You Only Live Twice from 1967, and Diamonds Are Forever from 1971. Obviously, the set does not include the 1969 film On Her Majesty's Secret Service because that starred George Lazenby, not Sean Connery. There have been a lot of people online up in arms about that, and I don't really understand why. I figured it was a pretty common sense thing there. Brief disclaimer as well, the images that you're going to see in this review are not taken from the 4K discs. They do not represent the quality of this release. The original Bond, Sean Connery, is the quintessential James Bond. This collection features 6 of the films that established the enduring franchise: Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball, You Only Live Twice, and Diamonds Are Forever. Also, one more brief disclaimer, this does not include the 1983 film Never Say Never Again, which did star Sean Connery. That was not an official Eon Productions film, and I don't know what the exact legal status of that movie is or if it'll be reissued at any point. We get 6 movies in this collection, the first of which being Dr. No, which launched the Bond franchise on film. It was not the first of the Ian Fleming novels, but it made sense to adapt it first because you could shoot most of it in one location, which is Jamaica. In this movie, Bond goes down to Jamaica to investigate the murder of some British intelligence agents, and he learns about the plot of Dr. No, a mysterious scientist living on an island utilizing technology to topple American missiles and rockets. This is the first entry in the series, and of course it's a little raw compared to some of the later ones. I mean, there is no pre-credits teaser sequence here. And there's a great supporting cast as well, including Jack Lord, later of Hawaii Five-0 fame, portraying CIA agent Felix Leiter, a character who reappeared in many Bond films portrayed by a variety of actors, and Ursula Andress portraying Honey Rider, one of the very first Bond girls, and to this day, one of the best. And there's a wide array of heroes and villains alike. It's a pretty good intro to the world of James Bond. Certainly less fanciful and has fewer gadgets than later films, but it did sort of set the template and get the ball rolling. We do see the first appearances of characters like M, portrayed by Bernard Lee, Moneypenny, portrayed by Lois Maxwell. Random trivia, those 2 actors have appeared in more James Bond films than any actor who played James Bond. From Russia with Love in 1963 was the second film in the Bond series. They sort of rushed this one into production because it was one of John F. Kennedy's favorite books. And this time around, Bond has to go back into action to try to get a coding machine from the Soviets. Despite suspicions that this is a trap, Bond leaps into action when he finds himself squaring off against the evil Red Grant, a super strong and violent Spectre agent, one of their top operatives. This is easily one of the best films in the franchise because it knows exactly what it's doing. It's fairly close to Fleming's original novel, although it does add in the Spectre terror organization, which was not in the original book. But in this case, I think it actually works to the movie's benefit. Robert Shaw portrays Red Grant. He's certainly one of the best Bond villains. This was also the first appearance by Desmond Llewellyn portraying Q, the quartermaster for British intelligence, who always gives Bond his gadgets, and of course chews him out pretty good for laying waste to them in the field. Llewellyn was the actor who appeared in the most James Bond films, being in every movie from 1963 to 1999, with one exception, that being 1973's Live and Let Die. The third film in the series, and easily the most famous and most revered Bond film, is Goldfinger. This time around, Bond goes into action with his outfitted Aston Martin to investigate Auric Goldfinger, a wealthy industrialist who may be involved in some illegal smuggling activities and who may even have some more sinister plans at hand. And this one actually improves on the original novel because it gets rid of some of the heavily criticized plot holes, and this really actually does the final product a lot of favors. You have Honor Blackman appearing in this one as probably the most famous of all Bond girls. I'm not going to say her name on my channel because I don't want to get flagged by the YouTube people. And then, of course, you have Harold Sakata portraying Oddjob, one of the most famous henchmen, the big tough guy who throws his bowler hat as a weapon. This was that point where you started getting into some of the quirky elements that defined the Bond franchise, but certainly not quite to the point that it started descending into the category of camp. There's some great moments in this movie, of course, everything from Bond's ejector seat to the infamous laser beam sequence. The fourth film in the series is Thunderball, released in 1965. And this time around, Bond finds himself going down to the Bahamas to investigate a Spectre plot launched by their number 2 man, Emilio Largo, hijacking nuclear warheads and holding the world hostage. And he has to do what's necessary to topple Largo's scheme and save the world from a potential nuclear strike. This movie was unique because it brought in underwater sequences which were done exceptionally well and were quite the gimmick back in 1965. Admittedly, I think these sequences are a little overused and take up too much of the film, but it doesn't change the fact that they looked absolutely spectacular. It was also the first James Bond film shot in a scope widescreen ratio, something that most of the subsequent films would follow. And it is a great looking film with some great characters as well. Fiona Volpe is certainly one of the greatest femme fatales in the James Bond franchise, giving 007 his match. All kinds of great supporting characters and elements to be had here. Thunderball is certainly a classic for the ages. At number 5, we have You Only Live Twice. This time around, Spectre is back, and Blofeld has put a plan into motion where he'll hijack spacecraft from Russia and the United States, eventually pitting the countries at war so that a new power can rise. Bond fakes his death to throw Spectre's trail off, surfaces in Japan, and goes up against the terror organization, investigating a lot of the fronts and goings-on, and he even joins a Japanese village, teams up with ninjas, and tries to pass himself off as a Japanese man to get himself into a situation where he can infiltrate Spectre's lair. There's also a great sequence in this one involving a gyrocopter going up against Spectre's helicopters that try to take him out of the sky, one of my personal favorite sequences in any Bond film. And then the last film in this series, it's the 6th movie in the series, but actually the 7th, because again, On Her Majesty's Secret Service is not in this collection, and that is Diamonds Are Forever. And this time, Bond finds himself face to face with Blofeld again, who's been utilizing body doubles, and this time around he's in a lair just outside of Las Vegas. He's employed the help of several diamond smugglers to help him create a satellite weapon he can use to hold the world hostage. Bond goes to Vegas with several allies in tow, and of course is being pursued by many of Blofeld's sinister agents along the way. The James Bond films are admittedly a bit hit and miss, but for the most part, these 6 movies are among the best in the series. Of the 4 movies that come first in this set, 3 of the 4 were directed by Terrence Young, those being Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and Thunderball, and they're some of the best in the franchise. Guy Hamilton would direct Goldfinger and came back for Diamonds Are Forever, as well as some of the Roger Moore films later on, and then Lewis Gilbert directed You Only Live Twice, and he'd come back later in the Roger Moore era as well. These movies, for moviegoers in the 1960s, were certainly escapist entertainment at its absolute finest. Going back and looking at how there was absolutely no CGI back in this era, how they did all these stunts, all this amazing work, it really stands as a testament to its creators. The series was produced by Albert R. Broccoli and Harry Saltzman, their company Eon Productions, and they brought James Bond from the page to the screen and made this character more immortal than series creator Ian Fleming ever could have imagined. Sadly, Fleming passed away after the first 2 movies were made, and though it is rumored that he visited the set of Goldfinger when it was being produced, Fleming, of course, was a secret agent back in World War II, and it's been widely stated that that was an inspiration for the Bond adventures that he wrote that would later end up on the screen. In a lot of ways, I think the changes that were made from the novels to the big screen adaptations we get in this set were actually for the best. I mean, a lot of the time I would say the films are superior to the books, but there are some cases where the books are a little more mature and serious, so that doesn't apply to every single film, unfortunately. Now, I will say this straight up. I know a lot of people today are easily offended by a lot of movies, and there are some very dated elements in these films. I mean, you might call them chauvinistic in a lot of ways. And, I mean, like I just said, there's even a sequence in You Only Live Twice where Bond has to pass himself off as a Japanese man in his attempts to throw off Spectre's trail and infiltrate their base. I mean, I don't really have to go into much of an explanation there. And Diamonds Are Forever actually has 2 very blatantly homosexual stereotype henchmen working for Blofeld, and again, I don't really have to tell you how badly that element of the movie has aged. Still, overall, I absolutely love these movies. James Bond is one of my favorite series of all time. I actually read somewhere online once that this series has the second most films of any feature film franchise in history. Only Godzilla has more. And most of the Bond films over the years have been very entertaining. Certainly, there are high points, there are low points. In this particular collection, Diamonds Are Forever is the only one that's a bit of a dud because it takes on a slightly campier tone, something that would carry over to the Moore era. Whereas the earlier films tend to have, more mature, more balanced tones. You either love the James Bond series or you don't, but I have to say, I have a ton of fun every time I go back and watch these. Around 2006, the James Bond movies came out on DVD with restorations that were done by Lowry. Those were also used as the basis for the subsequent Blu-ray releases of the film as well. These are not the Lowry masters. These are actually new remasters that are much more faithful. In retrospect, the Lowry masters, while good for their time, may have done a little bit of revisionist work with the color timing and may have even used some noise reduction and sharpening. But again, these are much more relaxed, natural-looking transfers, and the addition of Dolby Vision certainly gives it that nice extra punch. These transfers are gorgeous. These are by far the best the James Bond movies have ever looked. The Dolby Vision makes the colors bright and vibrant and pop off the scene, but I think what really impressed me more is how well the dark sequences in the movies looked, and they certainly look very good, bringing out the shadow detail and fine object detail, no matter how dark the sequences get. Again, the movies are products of their era, so there are things like rear projection shots, optical effects, day for night scenes, and those understandably are going to suffer a bit as a result, but overall, this restoration job is phenomenal. And when I do my list of the top home video releases of the year, you can pretty much be guaranteed this will have a spot on here. Sadly, there are no new bonus features on the discs, but most of the bonus features from the earlier Lowry releases are carried over here. So you get a lot of vintage EPK type stuff, trailers, TV spots, radio spots, vintage featurettes, and TV specials on the makings of the movies. One of my personal favorite features in here is a black and white featurette on Dr. No called The Guns of James Bond, where a firearms expert actually tests the 2 guns used by Bond in the film and even throws in a .44 Magnum for good comparative measure. There's all kinds of features like this in here, and they're a ton of fun. I love the James Bond series, and these are as entertaining as ever, if not a little dated. Picture quality is phenomenal. The only real complaints I have are, again, the lack of Blu-ray copies and the lack of new bonus features. But if you are a fan of James Bond, this series absolutely will not disappoint. Warner has put together a great set here. Again, only the lack of Blu-ray copies and new bonus features work against it. How about you? Are you a fan of the James Bond franchise? Who's your favorite Bond? What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite one of Q Branch's gadgets? Comment down below and let me know what you think. Also, remember to subscribe to this channel for more content. I'm always posting new videos. And make sure you give this one a like if you found it helpful. I'm Timothy Carlson. I'll see you next time.